Hi, today I would like to share with you the newest addition to my workshop, the WeCreat Vision laser cutter. Hi, welcome to Gray Lightning, my video blog about making things and playing games. And I've been interested in diode laser cutters for quite a while now, really for two reasons. One is because I know that a lot of my viewers use diode laser cutters, and I thought it was about time I got up to speed on that technology. But second, I had a need myself for a Class 1 laser cutter system that I could, a desktop system like this that I could take to a workshop or a show to teach or to demonstrate techniques. And I thought that a diode laser might be a good choice for that. Now, in the last couple of years, I've been approached by quite a few companies who have asked me to review their diode laser cutter, and I would always say the same thing back to them. And that was that I only allow fully enclosed, fully vented laser cutters into my workspace because I'm very safety conscious. And usually after I said that to them, I never heard back from them because they didn't have anything to offer me. But now there are a few of them out on the market, and this is a superstar, I think, in this category. And when WeCreat reached out to me and asked me to test the machine, I went online and looked at all the features and capabilities, and I was really excited because it was really meeting many of the requirements that I had. So what I'd like to do today is to just, first of all, give you an overview of what I think are the most important things about this system. Then I'm going to fire it up and I'll show you the software in action and the WeCreat MakeIt software. And I'll show you it actually working on some projects, and I'll give you my final thoughts on what I think about this machine, but I think you probably can already tell. I always do a lot of research before I do a video about something that's new to me. So I spent a lot of time on YouTube looking at other people's reviews of this machine. I spent a lot of time on manufacturer websites, the competitors, my current CO2 laser cutters website, and of course the WeCreat website, because I really wanted to be able to evaluate the facts for myself. But I think in the end, my real value is not to just to give you a bunch of data and facts that you can look up on the internet as easily as I can, but it's to share with you my impressions based on my experience. And my experience is going to come really from two main places. One is as a long-term, 8+ year user of CO2 laser cutters. That's what I own right now, is an 80-watt, really wonderful CO2 laser cutter. So that's one frame of reference I have. The other is my experience as a designer. Because in the end, the real question about this is, can I make what I want to make with it? And I have a lot of background in what I like to make because I've made tutorials about how to do it. And so I'm going to go back and say, okay, of all these things I've made on my other machines, what of them, if any, could I not do on this machine? And so that's the two perspectives I'm going to share with you. So my first topic is going to be setup, which is basically what are the things you have to do to get prepared for the laser cutter's arrival, what do you have to do when it shows up to get it working, and then ongoing maintenance is also an issue. So this is very simple. It runs on standard electricity. It's got a very small footprint relative to even desktop CO2 lasers are significantly longer because they have to encompass their laser tube. So it was very little preparation required. My CO2 laser, in contrast, I was told that it required a dedicated circuit, so I had to have an electrician come and wire that. I had to do all the exterior venting, so I had to buy an inline fan and run the tubing and have somebody install a vent through the wall of my workshop. Then a laser tube requires cooling when it's in use because it gets very hot and it will literally not work if you don't have a chiller hooked up to it or some cold water source pumping water through it the whole time. So I had to buy an industrial chiller for it. And then I found out really after I got it that because I lived in a cold climate, that in the winter there was a chance the water in the tube might freeze at night in my workshop that was not climate controlled. And so I ended up having to actually install a mini split system in the wall. The good news is I got air conditioning out of it as well, but that was a big additional expense. So this can live very happily inside a home or office because the ventilation, I have this fume extractor here, it does a great job. It needs no exterior ventilation. The second part of setup is what do you do when it arrives? Well, it comes in a pretty big box. So I had to get my hand card out to get it here to the workshop. But once it was here, I had no problem lifting it and setting it on this table. It's a small footprint. It fits easily on any standard workbench. And I attached the fume extractor, the air assist pump, the couple of other, the Wi-Fi and stuff in the back. I had that all set up in under 30 minutes, and it all worked great the first time. So setup was very easy. I think any beginner would be happy about that. And then finally, ongoing maintenance. In a CO2 laser, you have a big laser tube. The laser comes out at the end, and there's a series of mirrors that then take that laser back over to the head of the laser and point it down to the work surface. That's 3 mirrors that you have to keep clean, and they have to keep them in alignment. And if you don't, the laser won't work properly. So that's an ongoing maintenance issue that you do not have with a diode laser like this. And finally, calibration. I did have to calibrate my CO2 laser cutter because it didn't cut perfect squares. So I used Lightburn to do that. I made a video about how to do that. But this did perfect squares right out of the box, and it says on WeCreat's website that you don't need to do calibration, and in my experience, that's true. So very easy setup. So now I want to talk about safety because, as I said, safety is very important to me. And a Class 1, being certified as a Class 1 laser says that this meets a lot of safety requirements. It is fully enclosed. It has this special, not only a metal body that will withstand small fires, but a polycarbonate top here that's also flame retardant. The color of the polycarbonate is designed to screen out the blue wavelengths of the diode laser, so it protects your eyes. This will lift up, as you'll see when we see it in use. Right now it's in a position ready to engrave on a board that's in it. But when it goes into autofocus mode, it lifts up to its full height here, goes over and comes down. And that whole extension of the machine as it rises and falls is also made out of metal too, so it's very well made. The fume extractor is very effective. It goes through many layers of different materials to filter out the bad fumes. And when it's released into the air, down on the side here, you can smell that there's something going on. In this case, there's wood being burnt in some way, but there are no visible fumes and no dangerous fumes that come out of the extractor. The last important feature is that when you lift this lid, if the laser cutter is running, it will stop. It will not run when the lid is lifted. When you put the lid back down, it'll resume. So that's a very important safety feature. Now let's talk about some of the features of the Vision that are important to laser cutting. There is a rotary attachment for this machine. I have one, but I'm going to do a whole separate video on that because I want to not only show how easy it is to set up and how it actually fits inside this cabinet. The cabinet raises up this high, so there's plenty of room inside to hook up the rotary attachment. And also the autofocus has some special capabilities when you're doing rotary engraving, so I'm going to cover that in another episode. But the bed size on this is the work area is 16.5 inches by 11.5 inches, roughly. But the bed itself is actually larger than that. So the most common piece of wood I use in the shop is a 12 by 12 piece of plywood that easily fits in here. Also a 12 by 18, which is another standard size I use, easily fits in the bed. And then you just work within that 16.5 by 11.5 work area. It is an autofocus machine. The way autofocus works is that before every job, you have to run autofocus, which I think is a good discipline to enforce, but it's really easy. So you just push the button, it raises up to its full height. The laser head comes to the middle of the project that you're going to do. It goes down, it uses laser radar, not a probe. My CO2 has a probe that's to come down and touch, and then it lifts up just enough to get the right focal length. But that probe actually gets in the way many times of things like my magnetic clamps and stuff. So using that laser radar is actually a better technique. And it has a nice high definition camera right here in the middle. It's extremely accurate. It not only helps you in placing your design on the piece you're working on, but it helps you fit it into pieces of wood you've already been cutting all over in, and you still have some pieces where you think you can fit another part of a job into, and you can place it in very accurately and get the most out of your materials. So that's really great. There is an air assist pump over here that very easy to hook up, and it blows air close to the laser so that if any debris or smoke that's created in the cutting gets blown away and the laser, you get a cleaner cut and engraving. Let's talk now about power and speed, which they're interrelated issues, and it's a very complicated topic. I consider myself a relatively well-informed person, but I am not a super techie person. So I'm going to explain what I understand about the relationships between these and the differences between CO2 and diode and the Vision as a diode laser cutter. And I'm going to explain that in kind of my words. So first of all, CO2 laser cutters. The size of the laser cutter itself is driven by the wattage of the laser. The higher the wattage, the longer the laser tube needs to be. My 80-watt laser tube is 4 feet long. A 150-watt laser tube is 72 inches long. The smallest laser tube, a 40-watt, 35 to 40-watt laser tube, is 33 inches long. So the smallest desktop CO2 laser cutter you can get is going to have this dimension be 33 inches plus a couple of inches for the mirrors at the end. So the size is driven by the power. The other thing is that the nominal wattage, what it's called, is not really what you experience. Because everybody knows that if you want your laser tube to last a reasonable amount of time, you do not run it at full power. You just don't. I mean, 80% is about as aggressive as I get. I'll do 2 passes before I'll do 1 pass at anything over 80. And there are people that would say 80 is too high to run it. So it might be called an 80 watt, but it really is running at kind of a 65 watt level of power. So the number on it is not really the power you experience. The other thing I'd say about CO2 laser cutting is that it's a mature technology. In the 8 years I've been involved, I haven't read anything really new about CO2 laser cutter technology. So when you look for something on the internet, you can find a lot of stuff and it will be pretty much up to date and true. This is not true for diode lasers because they are in a rapid evolutionary stage, which means if you're looking at a video or an article that's 2 years or more old, I would say just stop watching that and go find something that's more current, because you could be told something that's absolutely not true. Now, basic diode technology has been around a really long time, so it's not that that's new. But my understanding is that diodes can be kind of an additive technology in the sense that you can take 4 5-watt diodes and you can use lenses to combine them together into a single beam that's a much more powerful beam. And that's how we're now going from the diode, the open gantries that they used to have, you know, people still have sitting on their table with kind of a 5-watt diode in it. Now this is a 20-watt diode and a laser cutter, and there is a competitor out that has a 40-watt. So now the question becomes, what do you need for what you cut? Speed. What about speed? Because that's another statistic that people like to use to convince you to buy their product. And that's something that's changing fast, because those kits people put together and the gantries they built on their table, they could do, I don't know, 100 millimeters per second or something on engraving. This machine that's max engraving speed is 600 millimeters per second. I looked on the website of my CO2 laser cutter manufacturer. Their top engraving, max engraving speed they quoted was 600 millimeters per second. I went to the 40-watt competitor of this machine, and they are listing a 600 millimeter per second engraving speed. So what you learn from that is that all of these quality machines are using very similar high quality materials for the gantry and everything that moves the laser head around. So now the thing that really differentiates speed is not on engraving, because, you know, the speed, that top speed is for in the x-axis when you're doing raster engraving and the laser head's going back and forth like this. That's the top speed it can reach in that application. But when you're doing vector engraving like this, the speed of vector engraving here is not based on this speed. It's moving not only in the x-axis, it's moving on an angle, it's moving in the y-axis. It has a lot to do with the design itself, how complicated it is, and how dense it is. And so to talk about speed in this context is hard, but I did this same picture in my last video on my big CO2 machine, and I've done it here, and frankly, I don't see any difference in speed when it comes to engraving. The difference is in cutting, and what differentiates it there is the power of the laser cutter. And obviously, if you have a more powerful machine, it can move at a faster speed and cut all the way through the material you're cutting. So now the question is, what materials do you like to cut? And is 20 watts going to meet your requirements or not? And like I said, this 1/8-inch plywood is what I use day in and day out. This machine cut it like butter. It was as fast as I experience on my big machine, and the cut is super clean. I don't have to clean off any of the char or anything afterwards. I was very impressed. So for most of what I do, 20 watts is powerful enough for me. So now we're up to one of the most important topics, and that's materials. Because the only real limitation that I found in a diode laser compared to a CO2 laser, they cut all the same materials with one exception. And the diode laser, because it is a visible blue laser, because of the wavelength of the laser, it will pass right through clear materials. It will be absorbed by the blue, and it will reflect white. So white, blue, and clear, you cannot cut. That is my understanding. I've not tested them all. I will be testing them because I'm just stubborn like that. But I have it on good authority, it won't cut those. You can engrave those materials with mixed success on the case of blue. In every case, if you mask them with a masking material like black acrylic paint, you can engrave them and then rinse it off afterwards and it will engrave. And I'm going to be testing that as well, but that's an extra step and it's a lot of work. So if all you want to do is edge lit acrylic, a diode laser is not going to be your first choice, that's for sure. On the other hand, one of the things that I did get from WeCreat is they have these packs of these really beautiful, professionally painted, in this case double-sided plywood that is designed to fit in this machine, to cut beautifully on this machine. There's a pack of patterned ones like this, and then there's another pack of solid colors, many beautiful solid colors. I already have lots of projects in mind for those, so I'm going to be doing some of that in the future. Last but not least is affordability. So I want to just say from the top that these machines are not in competition with the kits and the 5-watt laser heads and open gantries and stuff. They're just in an entirely different category. So I'm going to restrict my comments here to other laser, desktop laser cutter systems, class 1, which means they have these basic safety features. And that being said, if I talk about the current offerings of CO2 lasers in this space, they are 2 to 3 times more expensive than the WeCreat Vision is. Some of them are really not competitive at all. Some are quite competitive in that space, but even the most competitive is twice as expensive as this. If you look at other desktop diode laser cutters, the WeCreat is still significantly less expensive at this time, because everybody's giving discounts everywhere, so it's a very fluid pricing situation. But at this point in time, this setup here is significantly less expensive than the apples to apples competition. If you feel 20 watts is not enough for you and you need a 40 watt, then that puts you into a category that this can't compete directly in. And you might think going up to that significantly higher price is worth it. So that's it. Now I'm going to fire up my laptop and do a couple jobs. I'll show you the software and I'll finish with my closing thoughts.
The most common way I'm going to use the MakeIt software is the same way I use Lightburn, which is just a connection between my Illustrator drawings and my laser cutter. So to do that, all I need to do is to upload one of my SVGs. So I will use one from my last video, a lighthouse image. It imports very easily. I just size it and put it over into a corner of the board that I can see in this window here. It makes everything vector engraving by default. I'm going to have to put the cut line back in because it couldn't see that it was a different color in the original drawing. So I draw that manually and I set it to cut, and I take the default settings for that. Then I click on autofocus. You have to autofocus before every job, which, as I said, I think is really a good discipline to have. When autofocus is finished, you click Start. It gives you a time estimate, and currently this time estimate is very low. It's really a 13-minute job, not a 3-minute job. You click on Send, and then it tells you to push the button on the Vision, and it starts the job. So very straightforward. I'm going to run this for a bit at full volume so you can hear what it sounds like, and at real-time speed. There, that's better. Though actually that's significantly quieter than my big machine. I think one of the reasons why it has a hard time estimating the length of this job is that the software decides the order in which all of these lines get drawn, and some of it is pretty inefficient. It jumps around a lot when it doesn't really need to. Here it's doing the final cut, and as I mentioned earlier, this speed that I'm experiencing here is really very similar to what I see on my CO2 laser. Here it is finished, and it's beautiful. I'm excited to look through the project library that's available. So you can see here, it'll put all your recent projects under a tab on the home page. If you buy projects, it'll go on a separate tab, which is the purchase tab here. So that's the library you own. And then here are all the projects. You can do searches on this. They're grouped in different logical ways. Complex projects I looked at actually had a really good documentation on how to execute. But let's just look at a very simple one here, which is this little ornament. When you click the Make It button, it puts it on your workspace. I'm going to size this down and fit it in on some of the wood here on the board I'm currently using. And you can see how the camera would be especially helpful if you were trying to fit this in a very tight space. This is 3mm basswood, so I don't need to change the material, but it's got a really extensive material library. I pressed autofocus, so that's what's happening here as it goes to where the project is going to be cut, and it measures at that point. Now that the focus is done, I just press start. It gives me a time estimate. This one is still short. This is really about a 2.5-minute job, and it's at 1 minute and 44 seconds. Press the start button on the machine, and now we're going to watch it do the whole job. This is at 8 times normal speed. This goes in the steps that you expect. It does the raster engraving first, which in this case is a saying that's on the little ornament. Then it does the vector engraving, and finally it does the cutout. It's 2 layers, and it's quite cute. And this library will continue to grow. A unique feature right now is that they have a built-in AI function. So I put in this prompt, an elaborate 2D image of a single black heart isolated against a solid stark white background suitable for laser cutting. No 3D effects, no shades of gray. I picked this third model subject because it seemed to work best. I asked for 4 variations, and this is what it gave me. I think the first one is closest to what I had in mind, so I'm just going to select that and say Import to Canvas. I'll show in a later video how I used the Edit Image function to remove the background, but it's really pretty easy. I'm going to size this and place it on the board, and this is raster engraving, so I pop up this grid and I pick how dark I want the engraving to be, and then it uses that to set the power and speed settings. And then I want to cut this out, so I'm going to use a second function, which is the contours function. So if I select this and click on the contours button, because I've taken out that background, it will draw, in this case, the default is an engraving line around the outside. But if I move it here, you can see what it looks like. I'm going to set it to a cut instead of engrave. I'm going to position it back over the heart. And now I'm ready to engrave and cut it. I'll click on autofocus. After it's focused, you hit start, you push the button on the machine. You do the raster engraving first, as you see here, and now it's doing that very detailed cutout that I got from the contours function. This is a totally unique image. There's none other like it, and I think it's quite nice. Another feature I really love is the smart fill. So I put in 2 coasters and I sized and positioned my heart on one of them, and then I hit smart fill and it puts it on to the other one. If I had 10 coasters in here, it would have put 10 hearts on. And last, I want to talk about, can I make what I want to make with this machine? So I have 60 projects in my 60 project video, and here are 4 things out of the 60 I could not do with this machine because they are edge-lit acrylic. And as I said, that's a limitation of all diode laser cutters. Here are another 4 projects I couldn't do because of the size limitation. These are projects where the size of what I made was really driven by external factors, like one is a tabletop that I actually put in the bed of a machine and engraved. Another is a game board that holds a certain number of cards from a real deck of cards. Everything else here I could make with the WeCreat Vision. I might have to change a few of the materials. I might need to make a little tweak to the design, but they are all absolutely doable on this machine. So that's 52 out of 60 projects, or over 85%. And I think that that is a lot of creativity to be had for such a easy to use machine. As I said, I'm going to do a video on the rotary cutter. I'm going to use some of those great materials that WeCreat sent me, and that's all coming up. So if you're interested, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share it with your friends.